Hola, football nerds. Welcome to the very first edition of the Six Yards podcast, a podcast by football fans for football fans. Over the course of the next 9 football riddle months, we'll be discussing, deliberating, arguing. There'll be a lot of banter, we'll be debating, and in between, we'll also talk smack about everything that associates itself with the beautiful game week in, week out, and it already promises to be one hell of a ride. We are going to have a ton of talking points today from the opening game week, which was a lot of fun. Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Wolves all started with 3 points in the bag. Spurs, or poor old Spurs, it definitely was fun seeing them lose their opening game at home to Everton. And Everton surprisingly looked really good in that match. You might have guessed by now, I'm an Arsenal fan. My name is Supreet, and I will be a moderator for today. I'd also like to quickly introduce the rest of the guests who will join me in some random football rambling for today. So, first off, I'd like to introduce my good friend Karthik, who, for some odd reason, finds pleasure in supporting Tottenham, the small club down the road. We also have Manan, who became a football fan the day Roman Abramovich decided to invest some money in a really tiny, nondescript football club in London. We have two Manchester United fans in Cheyenne and Sushant because the world will never run out of United fans. There's just too many of them. And finally, we have Naveen, who is part of a secret club. He's only one of 5 Manchester City fans in the world. With that, let's get started with today's podcast. I'd like to first invite Sushant, and we will be discussing the champions, Liverpool. Hi, Sushant. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, Supreet. Thanks for that very generous introduction that you gave about me. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great as well. So, did you miss United in the first weekend?
Yes, I thought it would probably give us some time to complete some signings, but I don't think our club is in any way interested in currently doing such transfer business.
You mean some more time to practice penalties?
Yeah, possibly. I think that's what we're doing right away.
All right. So let's get into our first topic for today. That's Liverpool, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there's a lot of talk around the summer with all of the clubs. Chelsea getting the business done early. City, signing a couple of defensive players. Arsenal signed a few players themselves. Liverpool, defending champions, surprisingly only one signing, and that's a defender. Um, you know, um, historically we've seen teams that defend the title successively in successive seasons usually have a top signing, right? For example, most recent one that comes to mind is Manchester City signing Mahrez,
Yeah.
and then they went on to defend the title, right?
Yes.
You know, so how do you think Liverpool, is going to shape up, and what's the general consensus amongst, the Liverpool fans? What do they think is going to happen? Do you think they'll be able to successfully defend the title again?
So, to tackle the first point regarding investment, I think last year as well, when Liverpool won the Champions League title, there was a lot of talk on investing in the players and trying to bridge that very tiny gap that they had across Manchester City, where they just lost by a single point. And as we remember, they didn't really invest any money that time, and Klopp
Right.
eventually found a way to get them over the line, which helped where there was a regression in the City side of the football game. Uh, with regards to the faith, not so now that specific faith that Klopp has probably brought into the fans is what is probably keeping the Liverpool fans from openly, revolting against the FSG owners that they have. If you track their record over their ownership time period, they've generally moved towards a pattern where the club is self-reliant. There is no you could say owners investment
Yeah.
that their owners have done from their end, like
And they
Manchester
also
City.
did, reinvest the money from Coutinho and
Yes, yes. So they have probably looked at only investing money from the in the transfer market from whatever they earn out of the transfer market. Uh, so that has helped them bridge the gap, and I feel the only signing that they've done in the form of the Greek Costas was probably plugging a very a gap that they were lucky to not have exposed as much last season, which was a left back as a backup, while
Yeah.
Robertson has been fit for majority of the season, and so has Trent on the right back. There was still always that gaping, nagging feeling that if there was a long term injury, it could hamper their plans. Now, COVID has, of course, hampered their plans. I feel Timo Werner, who will obviously be talking about ahead as well when we discuss Chelsea, was probably on in line and had a wish to join Liverpool, but because of his price tag and also the revenue that have been hit on Liverpool side during COVID, it has really hampered their plans. Uh, Another player that Liverpool fans are like, I believe, hoping that they can capture is Thiago. We could still see Thiago add to that really strong Liverpool midfield, and I think he would additionally provide them a different dynamic there, because most of their midfielders, apart from let's say Kita, uh, isn't unknown for their attacking outlet to the
Yeah.
team. Right, you get more of that from their fullbacks. So especially when teams are looking to teams have last season have some teams have figured out how to just if you can keep the fullbacks quiet, you can probably stop the creative flow coming out of Liverpool's attack. So Thiago could is probably an important signing for them in the long run, but again it all comes down to financials and if they would have the money for that.
Right. That's actually quite interesting. So one of the points that you mentioned about Liverpool. Now the thing is, after the restart, if you noticed, Liverpool had obviously won the title by then. They
Yeah,
were out of, I mean, they were out of all the competitions by that point. The Premier League was, almost all of theirs, and uh, they really didn't hit top gear post football resumed, right?
yeah,
Um, and even if the even if the last two games are anything to go by, the Community Shield match against Arsenal, they underperformed,
yeah,
uh, and they struggled to get past newly promoted Leeds, right?
yeah,
So I mean, I don't think anyone's questioning how Klopp can probably inspire his team. The question is more about personal. Um, you know, I think Klopp is yet to figure out who's the perfect partner for Van Dijk at the back.
yeah,
I mean, Gomez has obviously started most of the games, but there's also Matip there. Lovren has
yeah.
already left the club. In midfield, Henderson is turned 30, Milner is 34. So I mean, there are a lot of gaps around there where Liverpool still can tend to struggle. And if one of their front three are say injured,
Yeah.
Salah, Mane, or Firmino, you're probably depending on Origi for
For the
uh,
goals.
scoring goals, right?
Yeah.
What do Liverpool fans think? Is how they're going to shape how their title defense is going to shape up this season, and where they eventually predict Liverpool finishing in the table.
So to tackle your first point regarding that shaky defense that you mentioned, it's very interesting because the way they set up against Leeds was very different to what we've usually seen Klopp in his previous two seasons set up as. So they played a really high line, an extremely high line. It was something similar to what fans would have been used to seeing for with Bayern Munich during the Champions League, which Flick employed, right?
Yeah,
So I would personally be interested to see how Klopp functions now, because as we have already discussed, there hasn't been enough of investment in the team to refresh uh, their whole team. So would he be looking at changing his tactics for this season and probably looking at going ahead on a more attacking mode, right, where he puts less pressure on his defense and more on scoring goals, just like they did against Leeds, where and as we discussed, their front three is so explosive that they can probably blow most of the teams out of the water, right?
yeah.
So, will he be following this approach going ahead, or will he revert to a more conservative approach, which he
I
has?
highly doubt it. Klopp has never changed his style right from his Dortmund days, right?
No, no. So there have been changes, I would believe, in terms of. So I wouldn't say in style where I'm saying he goes from a attacking coach to a more of a reactive coach like say Jose Mourinho, but more of in terms of how he sets up his team and where does the defensive line really lie. So against Leeds, it was really high, whereas in previous seasons we've seen them at least 10 to 15 meters back. How that changes the aspect is basically that in a higher line, your whole defensive, your back four is more their qualities are individualized because any single high ball and a one defender can be exposed to the whole attack. So the partnership with Van Dijk will be very important. I believe Gomez will have the starting place at this currently time of period because he
Yeah,
has great recovery pace, right?
yeah,
So when you're playing a high line, that is very important. Uh, but it's not as if Matip has not been an able partner. I think if you were to put any United defender as well next to Van Dijk, they would do well. Uh, so yeah, I think Van Dijk is most important to their defense. Van Dijk and Allison. Last season as well, we saw the Champions League bid have a wobble because of when they were missing Allison during that time, and they got knocked out during that time.
yeah,
In terms of midfield, I think Keita is someone who will have to finally rise up. His first two seasons, he's had a total of let's say 25 starts, and then another 10-20 appearances off the bench. So he will really need to push on now this season, right? He's someone who was bought for big money. So Liverpool doesn't really spend big money easily. They've spent more than 50 million on Keita, and I would believe most Liverpool fans would agree with me in saying that he hasn't really lived up to the price tag or the hype that was generated when he was bought.
yeah.
So how he shapes up will be important because he can again his own rise will help that team and have another dimension to their attack. In terms of a position, you can never count out this current Liverpool team from the top of the table, right? So they've my prediction is they will challenge City for the title. Though I think they'll because of things going around, I believe they will probably finish second. But if they can keep Salah and Mane fit for the entire season, I think they can easily finish first as well.
That's very interesting. So a second or first place finish is what Sushant is predicting for Liverpool. Thanks, Sushant, for your insight into Liverpool for this particular podcast. I'd now like to invite our second guest, Manan, who is a Chelsea fan, to talk a little bit about Arsenal. Hey, Manan, how are you?
Yeah, Supreet, I'm good. Thanks for inviting. Looking forward to discuss a lot of football.
Awesome. So, from a completely neutral point of view, what do you think about Arsenal this season?
To be honest, I've been very impressed with Arteta, primarily because of the situation he took control over in Arsenal. Emery was threatening to burn down the Emirates at that point. Arsenal struggling in unfamiliar territory of 11th mid-table position. So I think he's done and he had a wobbly start. But despite that, he sort of stabilized the team, and more importantly, stabilized the shaky defense that Arsenal have lately become notorious for. And all the while, beating the likes of Man United, City, Chelsea, and Liverpool in different competitions, of course. What particularly has impressed me the most is, it would have been very easy for him to fall into the trap of playing champagne football, especially after being Pep Guardiola's assistant for 2 years. But he sort of, came in, he saw how his team is doing on the training pitch in the games, and he carved out a plan that, maximizes their strengths and has made them much more resilient and robust than we've sort of accustomed to seeing Arsenal of mid 2010s. So yeah, and all the while, he's also not shied away from taking bold decisions, such as freezing out Matteo Guendouzi, for ill-disciplined behavior or something like that. So he's not afraid to do that. He's not afraid to stamp his authority. So yeah, and I think if he sort of keeps this up, I can definitely see Arsenal having a much more tangible progression than under Wenger in the later years, of course, and under Unai Emery. So yeah.
Interesting. So you touched upon Arsenal style, right? And as an Arsenal fan, I feel we've you know gone, progress leaps and bounds within such a short span. The team is much more solid at the back, a lot more pragmatic. So, from their performances against City and Chelsea in the final, and even against Liverpool in the Community Shield, do you think the team has enough to finish in the top four, or do you think Arsenal will probably struggle and end up in a Europa League spot again?
I think we'll get to know a lot more in the coming few weeks, predominantly because I believe if Arteta does end up signing Hussein Aouar and Thomas Partey, I think then there is a very solid shout for him to finish in the top four. And I'll in fact go so far as to back him to finish top four over the likes of Manchester United and Tottenham Hotspur. Assuming Kroenke being Kroenke, and if they don't sign up Aouar and Partey, I think still there's a good shout, but I do have to give the edge to Manchester United for them being already finishing in top three last season and strengthening their midfield and possibly their attack if they do end up signing Sancho.
Right, that's very interesting. And regarding Arsenal's defense, right, we've been talking about it so much over the last few years, and how Arsenal have simply failed to find that solid defensive midfielder since Patrick Vieira, and that was what 15 years ago, and it's just shocking that we've not signed a replacement since so long. But we've made some defensive signings this season. I've particularly been impressed by Gabriel, who obviously scored a goal against Fulham. But in general, there have been a lot of signings in the club. There's Willian, who we signed on free. I'm pretty sure you have a lot to talk about him.
Of course.
There's Saliba, a young French defender who we signed long back, but he was sent out on loan at Saint Etienne. We've signed Ceballos back on loan again for the season. And we've completed the full-time signings of Pablo Mari and Cedric at the back. And yesterday there was some more good news. We've signed Aubameyang for 3 more seasons. So some pretty interesting times ahead, right?
For sure. So I think the biggest signing for you is strengthening like you mentioned, the back four, which has been your Achilles heel for so long under the last years of Wenger and Unai Emery. I'm definitely impressed with Gabriel. He has his shaky moments, but you can probably chalk it up to him being still inexperienced at this level of football. He's just 22, so you can give him a free pass. But when you look at the stats, right, in terms of say tackle success rates or aerial duel wins or something on those lines, he's still a significant upgrade on the likes of David Luiz or Shkodran Mustafi and the general centre backs that you have at the club. So I think that's still a win for Arsenal when we say Gabriel and William Saliba, who are already at the club. So I think they'll make for an interesting pairing. Of course, Fulham are not known for their attacks, so there are bigger challenges down the road. But as I mean, for an Arsenal fan, I think interesting times are definitely ahead. When you talk about Willian, I think he's a good signing in terms of that he brings a lot of experience in the Premier League and other trophy winning experience, which is very important for the young team that Mikel Arteta is planning to build. And he'll
I see
obviously
what you
he'll have his.
did. I see what you did there.
Yeah. So so it's very important to have that kind of a personality in the dressing room, and of course him partnering with David Luiz, it's a completely different Brazilian samba altogether. So and yeah, I mean, talking about Dani Ceballos, I believe he's had a mixed season. He's not outstanding in terms of his performances. He started off very brightly. I remember that Burnley game very distinctly, where he sort of ran the midfield ragged there. But then he sort of tailed off in the mid-season under Emery. Obviously, injuries also took their toll, and again in the the business end of the season, he was again a little bit on the better side of it. But I think Arteta saw enough positives to get him back for another season. It'll be interesting to see how he works in this Arteta system, and obviously it remains to be seen whether Arteta persists with the three at the back. But yeah, it's definitely a positive intent that Arteta has shown in the market. Pablo Mari probably will remain very much the third or fourth choice centre back. Obviously, once
He's
Saliba
injured.
finds his
He's
feet.
injured as well.
Yeah, obviously that as well. And Cedric is an interesting one because I mean, I very clearly remember that he was quite, very good. In fact, at Southampton for 2000 from 2016 to 2018, and even earned a loan to Inter Milan in between. So, but I don't know if he'll be vying for that starting spot, especially with Hector Bellerin and Ainsley Maitland-Niles ahead of him in the pecking order. So it's interesting how Arteta shapes this Arsenal side up in his image. So definitely positive times ahead.
Thanks, Manan. So your prediction for Arsenal this season is a top four finish, right?
Yeah, so there are two scenarios for me. If Arteta manages to land his targets, which is Husam Aouar or Thomas Partey, even one of those, I think they'll finish in top four because of the credentials that Arteta has shown.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I'll have to give the edge to United and Arsenal for the fifth spot.
All right, very interesting. Thanks, Manan, for your section on Arsenal.
Yep.
And now is the main show. We've got Tottenham Hotspur, and I'd like to welcome my good friend Karthik onto the podcast. Hey, Karthik,
Hey Supreet, what's up?
how are you doing?
Mixed reactions, but I think I'm hanging on.
Do you think Tottenham will end up signing Bale?
Yeah, let's save that for a later bit, okay? I really don't want to get too excited on that.
Okay, so my first question is obviously going to be a little bit of dissection of the first game against Everton, which Tottenham lost. What is the general consensus amongst Spurs fans about Jose and his style? And I'm pretty sure all of you had your reservations when Jose signed for Tottenham. He had a very mixed spell at United, and everyone's been saying he's probably done and dusted. So, what do Spurs fans think about Jose? Can he guide them to glory this season? Is it working out for Spurs this particular arrangement?
Okay, coming to in terms of how Spurs used to play football, what we're seeing right now is a complete makeover. Okay, Spurs have always been associated with a style of football that has flair. There's some excitement factor that revolves around the way that Spurs typically play. But it's a complete change in that system. Okay, I think that is how Jose's teams have played football traditionally, and I
Hmm.
think what he's trying to bring across, although seems boring, but defensively he's trying to make us solid. Okay,
Hmm.
and that's how Jose's teams are built. They're built from the back. He concentrates on the defense first and try to get his players. But I guess that is where it all went wrong last season. I felt, and in fact, even against the game of Everton. Uh, Jose simply doesn't have the players at Spurs that he would like. Okay, you
Hmm.
have defenders that are way too error prone. Okay, in the likes of Aurier, Dyer, Sanchez, and
Yeah.
Toby Alderweireld is also someone who's not in his prime, you can say. So I think that is
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
his focus is. He's got Eric Dyer to sign a long term contract, but I really don't see him. I mean, yeah, I'm sure Jose believes in him, but they're still error prone.
Hmm.
And as long as this issue is not addressed, I'm sure the team is going to continue to struggle. Okay, you can't blame Jose on this. Jose has a clear vision. He knows what he wants to do, and he knows where the problems are. So it all comes down to how the board, especially Levy, tries to work with him and look for a solution. But at the same time, I also want to highlight one more thing. Okay, I think the style that Jose adapts is defend to the defend to death, and then when there is a even the slightest form of a transition that is available, he wants that quick pass. He wants that quick pass either from the defense or the transition from some, let's say a midfielder like a Lo Celso or a Harry Winks. They're the key to it. Okay, that pass is what the forwards rely on to initiate a counter attack. That has also become a challenge in terms of we really don't have a creative passer apart from Lo Celso who can actually transition that countering an attack and transitioning that to a counter attack. So I think this is another area that the squad really needs a boost in terms of getting better. But I guess it's not really down to the manager. I think there's a lot of negativity right now at the club in terms of the players and also in terms of fans. Uh, so you clearly see that players are not giving as much as they should. Okay, I think that laziness has creeped into picture. People are not willing to work hard. So clearly, the style that Jose wants to work with is not working at this moment. However, let me reiterate again, he knows where the problem is. So if the board backs him and gives him what he wants, then I'm going to see a completely different Spurs side with definite shift in the mentality.
Right, but do you see those signings happening right now? There are two being mooted, obviously, both from Real Madrid, but it's still up there in the air. And do you really think that these two signings can actually transform the way how Spurs are currently playing, lift up the mood in the dressing room, just change how they play this season? Do you see that happening?
I mean, yeah, if Bale signs, that's gonna lift the mood big time. Okay, I think Eric Dyer has already mentioned in his press conference today, earlier today, that uh, they are discussing this in the dressing room. There are already talks that are happening in the dressing room, and people are already excited. So yes, it's definitely going to be a big boost for the team as well as the fans. But that's not the only thing that Spurs need at this moment. Okay, let's say we go for a left back as well as Bale, but
Hmm.
still there are a few areas that Spurs have to address, and that number one is a striker. Uh, Given the fixtures, the tough fixture list that we have, it's been cruel, man. It's a nightmare fixture.
Yeah.
I really think that Spurs are cursed in that sense, but it's a nightmare fixture, which definitely, and I think a lot. The term that I hear a lot is a backup striker. No, we don't need a backup striker. We need a second striker. Okay, it's not a backup. He has to be someone who can play along with Kane, or has the ability to lead the line, by himself. You look at the options that the other top six clubs have. They have two, three. Every club has two to three strikers on the bench, but that's not the case with Spurs, and that's going to hurt them. If I know, this is something that they're very rigorously looking at. There are so many names that have been linked with Spurs in order to have a new striker. There was the like of Victor Osimhen, who went on to Napoli, because come on, I mean, Spurs are not going to spend about 60, 70 million on a striker having Kane on the ranks. Uh, Milik is another name that keeps coming up, but it seems very likely that he's going to join Roma. Callum Wilson and Ollie Watkins from Brentford were touted as a possible signings, but uh, what I understand from that is we were not looking for small names. Let me tell you, I think
Hmm.
there were enough opportunities to sign either Wilson or Watkins, but
Hmm.
Tottenham just didn't go for it because they
Yeah.
know they had the money. They have the money to spend. Okay, it's not about the money. Uh, in terms of money, they have enough to bring in a striker. And but yes, I think over the last couple of days, Bellotti is a name that we've been linked with in excess of 50 million. So yeah, I think they're definitely going to sign a striker for sure. Something has to be wrapped up in the coming days, I guess.
And that window is, it's going to close soon. I think the number of names on that list is also going to shrink.
Correct.
I think it's going to be difficult. And if Harry Kane is injured at some point during the season, it's just going to be so difficult to replace 15, 20 goals that he can bag in the Premier League every season, right?
Correct.
What's the situation with Dele Alli? Obviously he was substituted very early in the game at halftime against Everton. Does he have a future under Jose?
I really don't know. It's a very, very strange substitution, mate. See, as inconsistent as he can be, I believe he's the only creative mid in the team with Lo Celso currently out. To be very honest, given how the game was played out, Dele's pressing was decent in the first half, right? I know he was
Yeah.
a bit lazy in terms of getting into positions,
Hmm.
but that absolutely didn't warrant a change. Okay, I think even
Right.
Jose admitted later that it was a tactical change, but it was very, very harsh on Dele, and I think it didn't clearly work out for Spurs in the second half.
Yeah.
However, I'm a bit concerned on the rumored fallout between Jose and Delhi. Okay,
Hmm.
I just hope that it remains a rumor. But yeah, I think Jose. I was just going through the press conference that we had earlier today, and Jose clearly mentioned it was a very tactical change, and these things happen, and there's nothing to really worry about. So yeah, I don't think he's fallen out of favor with Jose, but yeah, it might hamper the relationship a bit, but that is how Jose is, right? He's a man with proper man management skills, and I'm sure he's gonna uh, pull Delhi out of this slump.
Interesting. And final question for you: where do you see Spurs finishing the season?
um, as things
And also,
stand.
do you think they can end their trophyless run this season?
See, as things stand, I think it's going to be fifth or sixth, depending on the Europa League run. I think that's going to be a very crucial thing because we've got trips coming up to Bulgaria and a possible trips to Macedonia or Romania. So there's going to be a lot of fatigue in terms of traveling, in terms of fixture congestion. So, and we're not done in the transfer, mate. I think uh, Regulon is looking increasingly likely to happen. I think Bale should also go through unless and until there's some last minute complications. But even after that, I think we're looking at a couple of more players, especially in terms of bringing in a centre back and a support striker. I think if these signings go through, I really do not see any excuse for Spurs to finish in the top four. I think they have a solid team. I think they have a world class forwards in Kane and Son. Bergwijn also. I mean, we shouldn't rule Bergwijn out. He's young. He's a very interesting prospect. But yeah, I really think Spurs have the best chance in over a decade to win a trophy. But again, it's Spurs, right? I think Mourinho is very wary of that fact. The mentality is what he wants to change, and he clearly mentioned that it comes with time. So yeah, I think they're more nastier as a team. They're going in for tackles. They're not being a bunch of good guys. I think that is something that you have to give credit to Jose to. But yes, I really believe that getting Regulon, Bale, Belotti, and probably Kim Min Jae is the possible centre back that we're looking at. If these signings do go through, top four is not going to be a possibility, but I guess it's going to be an expectation.
All right. Thank you so much, KV, for your thoughts on Tottenham. So a top four finish is what KV is saying. If not, he expects them to finish in sixth or seventh, right? All right. Moving on. The next club that we're going to discuss in today's podcast is going to be Chelsea, who started their season with a 3-1 win at Brighton. And I'd like to welcome Sushant to talk about Chelsea. All right. A lot has been said about all of Chelsea's signings during in the transfer market. They signed Ben Chilwell, they signed Ziyech and Werner early, they signed Silva on a free transfer. How do you think they're going to shape up this season? Obviously, the first game they played pretty well against Brighton, got 3 points um, from a reasonably tough away ground to play at. And they also snapped up Havertz very recently for 70 million, right?
Yeah.
Um, how do you think Chelsea are going to shape up this season, right? And all of these new signings in general. Are there too many new signings? Will they take time to gel in?
Yes, so I think in terms of how the team will shape up, it'll be a challenge for Lampard because they've of course made a lot of good signings, but at the end of the day, uh, it's not about the quality on paper. It's all about how they function together as a team on the pitch. And as we saw in the first game itself, just signing new players doesn't really solve all the problems that Chelsea have had previously as well. So even during the game, there was a good chunk of time where Chelsea was actually on the back foot, where and Lamptey was really enjoying his stint out on the wide right, and him another Chelsea academy player, former academy player, uh, lifting up teams in the league. So what will be really interesting to see here is that how Kai Havertz and Werner are used going ahead, because while Timo Werner was primarily be playing played as a striker up front all on himself in the first game. Havertz was used on a right wing position, whereas primarily Havertz features used to feature last season behind the striker, and getting into the box and on the deliveries.
Yeah.
So once Ziyech returns from his injury worries and Pulisic is fit, so you probably will see Kai Havertz moving infield. Another interesting angle would be how Chelsea play. They actually had less than 50% possession in the last game,
Hmm.
and there was a lot of long balls that we saw Kepa playing from the goal kick, and even when the ball was being passed back to him, which is something which is new to our Timo, because he's not really a aerial weapon. He's not really considered an aerial weapon. It's his
Hmm.
blistering pace that worries defenses a lot. He'll play on the last man. He'll run to the left. He'll make a runs to the left hand side. So he's pretty a different kind of striker that Stamford Bridge has really grown to love. So they've if you see historically their best strikers in the last 2 decades, they are Diego Costa and Drogba. So they were all historically back to goals, bringing other players in, where then wingers like Hazard and Willian used to just play off those strikers. The closest player that probably Chelsea has seen as a striker in Timo Werner is probably Torres, and even he, by the time he reached Chelsea, was a shadow of himself, right? So how they evolve their game going ahead, and with the addition of Thiago Silva in the team, will they probably look at playing more out from the back? Will that possession style also eventually be implemented by Lampard in his team? Will again be something interesting to see, and primarily who will partner Thiago Silva in defense, because you would assume that such a short term signing in Thiago Silva, with his vast experience, would mean that he'd probably start a majority of the Premier League games. Who plays next to him? Would it be Zuma, Christensen, or if even Tomori stays back, would it be him or Rudiger? We saw Christensen and Zuma both do reasonably well the last game. So yeah, and of course Ziyech would be an interesting aspect on the right wing, because we saw him in the preseason. So Timo Werner and Ziyech have probably had some time with the team, so you could see some sort of chemistry there with Timo Werner in the team. But your other signings, whereas there's Thiago Silva, Ben Chilwell, who's still injured, so he's not even reached the training ground. Forget about having some time with the team. uh, Thiago Silva, Kai Havertz, who's just recently joined, and also they are currently looking at a link to a keeper still. I'm still curious to know where Chelsea are getting all these funds from. But yeah, Edward Mendy is being linked as a challenger to Kepa. Lampard had a passionate defense of Kepa, where he said he's a Chelsea keeper, and he's going to be our first choice for now. But let's see how it goes, because if Edward Mendy comes in to picture, then Kepa would have a pretty good strong challenge to that spot.
Right. That's interesting, Sushant. So you touched upon Chelsea's midfield, and there's just so much talent there. Jorginho, Pulisic, Mount,
Yeah,
Ziyech, Havertz,
Kante.
Kante, obviously.
Yeah.
What is considering all of them are fit? What is Lampard's first choice midfield going to be, given that they start with one striker up front these days? It's either going to be Werner or Giroud.
Prob-
How do you
yeah.
think Chelsea's five-man midfield is going to line up? Who are the top? Who's going to be Lampard's pick for his best five in midfield?
So I think, considering how they lined up last season in some of the big games, I think, and considering the signings they made, I think with Timo Werner up top, he'll probably be flanked by Pulisic and Ziyech. You would imagine, right? As their first choice, and Kai Havertz lining up right behind Timo Werner. So I think that would be your front four. The other two remaining midfield spots would, you would imagine, again, possibly one would go to Kante, considering his value to the team, especially in a defensive phase, and also alongside him, Kovacic, because I think Kovacic brings something important to that team in terms of ball circulation, and I think that was something that they sorely missed in the first match, where there was no one in midfield to really keep that position and keep things ticking, right?
Yeah.
Especially under pressure. So, which is why one of the reasons why I feel they played a lot of long balls during the match to elevate all that uh, pressing that Brighton was doing, and coming up to the Chelsea defense. So I think Kante and Kovacic would probably form your midfield alongside Kai there. But yes, so I think with Kante also slowly nearing, has had a lot of injury issues, and I don't think he would probably be. He's going to probably be the always sure shot starter. I think him and Jorginho might rotate a lot. And of course, as we know, I do not think Lampard is particularly still completely happy with that position. They still wanted to sign Declan Rice, is one player that they keep getting linked to in
Yeah.
defensive midfield, right?
That's
But I think that would probably be one step too far in this transfer window for Chelsea, because if they sign Declan Rice and they get a keeper, I think that's a near perfect window to any that any manager would love to have. I think they'll probably buy whole 11 in the window.
if they do end up signing Declan Rice and Mendy, I think they need to be investigated by FFP. Right.
Yeah, I think City should be the one lodging that request.
All right, that's interesting, Sushant. So where do you see Chelsea finishing this season?
So I think this season they should finish third. I know last season they actually tied up on points with United, so they were as good as third than like the fourth they were. But in terms of points, I think that is where the real progress will be marked. Considering the number of signings they've done, I don't think they can challenge City and Liverpool for that top two spot. But yeah, they should make progress in terms of the points they collected last season, which was 66, right? So closer to at least 10 to 12 points swing positive for Chelsea is something that they would probably be targeting. So basically, bridging the gap closer. And yeah, because it's only primarily because they have the quality, but it's just about bedding them in, and that could take a month or two.
Interesting. Thanks, Sushant. So a third place finish is what Sushant predicts for Chelsea, and that brings us nicely to our Manchester special of this particular podcast. We will be doing a very quick preview of the seasons for both Manchester City and Manchester United. I'd like to invite Naveen, who is a Manchester City fan, and Cheyenne, who is a Manchester United fan, onto the podcast next. Hey Naveen, hey Cheyenne.
Hey Supreet, hi.
Hey, hi Supreet. How are you?
Great, I'm doing great. So let's start firstly with City, who finished a ton of points behind Liverpool last season,
Yeah,
right? Um, there's been talk about, in fact, for the last couple of seasons, about how Guardiola has failed to replace Company, and how all of his other defensive options, Otamendi, Laporte, all of them, Eric Garcia, Cancelo, none of them really reliable enough to, be good enough to help City compete for the title, right? And they've signed up Nathan Nake. They've signed Ferran Torres in defense over the window. Do you think, uh, or rather, do City fans feel that is good enough to last a grueling Premier League season as well as a grueling Champions League season this time around?
so coming to the defensive signings, we have just Nathan Ake this season, and
Hmm.
no, he's not the direct replacement to Company, just because the character and the leadership which Company brought on the field, and Koulibaly could be one of those guys, but we are still negotiating the deal with Napoli, not directly with Napoli. That is another issue. So, but we do need someone as strong as Company in the central defense. Uh, I'm not really worried about the wing backs. They are doing pretty good, but yeah, centrally we do need someone as strong as Company. And John Stones needs a good run of matches, and he needs to avoid injuries somehow. and him partnering with Laporte, or Ake partnering with Laporte, would be good enough.
Right, but do you still see even with a fully fit City squad, even with John Stones and Laporte, that still really doesn't sound convincing enough to mount a title challenge when you think of Liverpool, who have Van Dijk at the back. Um, and almost all of the other teams have some stalwart defenders.
Yeah.
City, on the other hand, are struggling to find that central defensive pairing. Considering Koulibaly could still be some time away, and there are still a lot of complications in that deal. If City were to start the season and end it with the current set of defenders, do you see them finishing in the top two or probably even winning the league?
So if Koulibaly is not signed this season, I'm afraid City would have a repeat of what happened in the last season. I don't see us finishing at the top, maybe second or third, but not at the top. And again, probably struggling in the Champions League too. So that is how it stands as far as the defense is concerned. We need Koulibaly somehow.
Right, that's interesting. And Leroy Sané has gone to Bayern for about 54 million. David Silva's left. Are there any holes in the midfield that City need to plug before the season starts?
So I think we are good, in fact, very good as far as the attacking options are concerned. Though Sane left, Sterling has been doing pretty well on the left since a while.
Right.
And on the right, we have many options like Mahrez and even now Torres coming in.
Yeah.
And although Silva cannot be literally replaced because, he definitely a legend, but City as well as Pep they have been grooming Foden to play a similar kind of role.
Yeah.
And we don't have any doubts in Foden's capabilities, so it would be very interesting to watch this season what role Foden plays, how Pep uses him, and whether we really, feel the need for Silva.
Right. And any other rumors around Manchester City before the transfer window closes?
So the one big rumor was definitely Messi. I don't think so. We have ever come as close, or anybody else has ever come this close. Maybe next season, I don't know. But let's see. And I think Kolibali is the only one we are looking forward to right now.
All right. Great. So your prediction for City is a top two, but if a solid defensive signing fails to materialize, you think they're going to finish second. Is that correct?
Yes. So considering Kolibali doesn't happen, okay,
Mm.
if somehow our a central defenders rise to the occasion and they are able to, you know, uh, at least three or four of the central defenders are able to play well, and Pep gets his tactics right this time by not changing the tactics way too frequently and not changing the player positions and roles way too frequently.
Yeah.
We can challenge for the top position, but otherwise, yeah, it's either second or third.
All right. Thanks, Naveen. That's a good analysis for City. And they open their Premier League um, quota with their round of fixtures this weekend. As well, do Manchester United. So, Shine, welcome to the podcast. So much action for Manchester United in the off season, with Harry Maguire getting prison time in Greece, and Greenwood being caught with the England camp in Iceland. What's happening at Manchester United?
Very honestly, I think no one actually has a clue as to what is happening. I mean, not only those 2 points that you covered, but also in the transfer market. If you have been looking into it, we have been, as with every season, we have been linked with every goddamn player on this planet. But the final result is Van de Beek, which has turned out to be a brilliant signing. But it's not the story of this season, but the transfer structure with the United board and etc. that is happening. There's a lot of angst in the fans and
Hmm.
in the entire footballing world, that
Yeah.
what is actually happening with United? Why are they not able to push through all those transfers, the players that are there on the radar? I'm not too bothered about those off-season, I think, incidents that happen. They are maybe people. At the end of the day, we are all humans, and maybe Maguire wasn't right in doing whatever he did, being the Manchester United captain. Maybe he should have acted well, and maybe Mason Greenwood, being just a 17-year-old, should have also acted properly. But then he's just a kid, and he learned.
All right. Thanks, Shine. That was pretty interesting. So, what's a general consensus amongst United fans? What are your hopes for the season, and do you think Solskjaer can probably help United to another top four finish and probably end up with the trophy as well?
So I think the general mood right now, as I said, is only being optimistic. I think with the acquisition of Van de Beek, that has put in a lot of hopes because he's gonna be playing a pivotal role in that midfield. I think the team was crying out for some midfield reinforcements after the bulk of the creative work being done by Bruno after he joined the club. I especially can, if I can recollect, the Norwich game in the FA Cup quarterfinals where he looked extremely tired. There was not an iota of creativity, being so tired. And then at the fag end of the Premier League season, where it was absolutely clear that we needed someone apart from Bruno in the midfield for those sleek passes or for those nice little run-ins. So it's
Hmm.
it's interesting that we have got hold of Van de Beek. He's a top-notch player. He was with Ajax the last couple of seasons. If you look at his stats, he's played almost 30 odd matches with 8-9 goals and 5 to 10 assists on an average. And he's a versatile player, as has been pointed out. He can play in the number 10. He can play up front. And if you put that into context of the midfield and the forward line, we certainly can aspire to put in some extra goals on top of the 66 that we scored last season.
Right.
I think what United fans are looking at is that this acquisition may just free up Pogba to have much more breathing space and to expand his wings in terms of the attacking prowess that he has. It might happen, and as I said, that since Van de Beek is a very versatile midfielder, that Van de Beek will lie in front of that four-man defense, and Pogba will push ahead with maybe Bruno Fernandes. Maybe not all the games, but we'll have to wait and see. But if that happens, then I think we can expect much more goals and assists from Pogba. So yeah, interesting times.
And what's your prediction for Manchester United's position at the end of the season?
I think we have to be very cautious when we are deciding on this positioning. I think very honestly, we right now, with the lack of acquisitions and the current mood, and with how Wolves have played over game week one, Everton mighty
Hmm.
impressive, and with remaining Liverpool, Chelsea, and City already there. Spurs also, of course, with Bale and Reguilon, Doherty. I think fighting for the top four would be the main target. I would love to say that we will achieve the third position, but it looks really difficult. I think fourth would be something that United fans would be pretty happy with.
So a top four finish is what Shine is predicting for Manchester United. Thanks, Naveen and Shine. All the best for your opening games this weekend. And this nicely brings us to our final segment, a special segment. And today we are going to cover a newly promoted side who everyone's been talking about. It's Leeds United, the mighty Leeds United. So I'd like to invite KV and Manan onto this particular final segment. What are your first impressions of Leeds, of Bielsa and his uncompromising style of football? And where do you see this Leeds team eventually finishing at the end of the season?
Yeah, so I'll probably take that if you don't mind, Kiwi. I have been actually following a few championship games last season, and it makes up for a very interesting viewing, to be honest, Supreet. And not just Leeds United, but I did happen to see a few games there, and the ones that particularly caught my attention were their games against Middlesbrough at Ellen Road that they won 4-0, and the one against Bristol City. That was probably a 1-0 win, but again, so the performances, the the movement on the pitch, it truly showed what Bielsa is all about. Superb quick passing, high press, blistering press in transition. So that's what Bielsa has created as his own philosophy, and he just sticks to his guns. Even, I mean, I'm sure you would also remember that they gave a really good run for their money against Arsenal in the FA Cup, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right.
so yeah, so Bielsa has his own sort of philosophy, and obviously he's one of the greatest managers around, and all the brilliant minds in managerial game, Guardiola, be it Pochettino, be it Simeone, adore and idolize him. Uh, Not to mention, Leeds also created the most number of big chances in the championship last season. So you can just imagine that he's imprinted his philosophy over such a short period of time. 2 seasons is all it took. There have been very near misses, very hard takes for Leeds. Most recently, obviously last season. Before that, I can remember 2005 when they reached the playoff final and lost to Watford.
Yeah, yeah,
So there have been near misses. Obviously, the 16th time is the charm. So Bielsa is the 16th manager since they went down first in 2003. So it's been a wonderful story for a neutral to see Leeds back to where they belong. And obviously, the first impressions when you talk about the game against Liverpool, they stick to the side, wouldn't they? So any manager, I'm not even just talking about teams that are newly promoted. That aside, any manager going up against record-breaking champions at their home, you would probably expect them to play on the counter and absorb pressure and sit back and defend. Not Bielsa. That's just not his style. So it's refreshing to see that, and they almost got a result as well. So it's brilliant to see that Bielsa has a policy and he sticks to it, and the good part is that his players also have that unwavering belief in his methods, and they execute it to perfection. So it's very good to see that, and Leeds actually ended up having more possession, more passes played, more accurate passes, all of that
yeah.
basic stats that stat nerds talk about. So if this is actually the trailer to the season, I mean, I'm pretty sure Leeds fans are very excited about the season ahead. So that's just my view on the first impressions that we got from Leeds United and Bielsa.
Right. That's good lowdown on Leeds. And what I've also noticed is they've stuck to their core of players over the course of the whole of last season. There was this you knew that there would be like 6 or 7 names on the starting lineup for Leeds, and all of them also started against Liverpool. Trinos Delas and Helder Costa, Matheus Clich, Jack Harrison on the left, Calvin Phillips, who also got an England call up, Bamford, obviously ex Chelsea, up front. So, Karthik, how do you see this particular Leeds uh, team actually fare in the Premier League? Obviously, most of these players are experiencing the Premier League for the very first time. Do you think it's going to be the first season syndrome where they'll actually outperform and then they'll just fizzle out in the second season? How do you think that this particular team is going to uh, play?
Yeah. So what I really like about this, the Leeds team and the core group of players that they have is, they're not superstars, they're not global superstars, but they're players with a very good footballing ability, but they play for the manager. You can see that on the pitch. They give their 100%. The way they press. Okay, just not just the way of pressing is intense, but their ability to play the ball from the defense is unmatched. I think I haven't seen any team sort of rattle the likes of Van Dijk and Trent Alexander Arnold to an extent that Leeds were able to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought they were fantastic, and I think they're sort of suffocating Liverpool with the press. They did not give any loose chances for Liverpool to sort of work on. But I believe, see, from the core group of players that they have, I think there are two players that have caught my eye, and I think they will be absolutely pivotal in their run in. And I think it's Matheus Clich. I think he's a creative engine. I know a lot of people will talk about Pablo Hernandez, but I believe Clich is, Clich offers another dimension with his, the range of passing that he has. And also Jack Harrison. I know he's on loan from Man City, but what a touch, man! I think he's got pillows on his boots. I think the kind of touch he has and his pace and trickery, his ability to cut through. I think his partnership with Helder Costa, I think on both flanks, are going to be the driving force for Leeds United in terms of how they counter. But yes, I think Calvin Phillips is also key man. I think he's got a role that not a lot of defensive midfielders in the league has, because he needs to protect his back four, because Bielsa believes in that system. He's got his left back and right back who thrust forward, and then at that time Phillips has to start supporting his central defenders. But at the same time, okay, what is interesting is both Hernandez and Clich are someone who keep driving forward, so that leaves a lot of space in between, right? I think
Yeah.
that he's got to manage to cover his back four, at the same time not leave too much of a space wherein he doesn't support the forwards going ahead. So I think he's going to be a very a key man for Leeds United. But at the same time, I think Bamford is also an interesting case. I know a lot of people didn't think that he had the ability to lead the line for Leeds United in Premier League, but I think his performance was against Liverpool was fairly good. I think he pressed a lot, and the opportunity he had to take a goal, he took it like a true poacher. So, but I still believe at some point in time, the record signing Rodrigo is going to start ahead of Bamford, but but I still think they have to keep some faith in Bamford and give him the chance that he deserves. So overall, I think it's going to be a very proper system that Bielsa is going to play against almost every team. It's. I think we've already seen the likes of Pep Guardiola and Mauricio Pochettino in terms of how they try to play his brand of football. But I think Premier League is very very lucky now that we are actually getting to see this whole setup from the master himself.
That's a good lowdown again, Karthik. And I'm actually quite fascinated to see how where Leeds actually end up finishing, and also the point you made about Bamford. There have been question marks obviously raised whether he can up his game, play that important striker who can at least net in about 15 goals to help Leeds survive. That's going to be the big question that all Leeds fans will be asking of him. So, where eventually do you think Leeds will finish the season? Do you see them carrying this momentum and maybe surprising everyone and finishing in the top 10? Or do you think they're going to eventually get sucked into a relegation dogfight?
I think top 10 is realistically very possible, Supreet. But one concern that I have, given the amount of high intensity training sessions that Bielsa has, the high intensive game that they play every match week in week out, I fear there would be a burnout in the players probably come, let's say, December for that matter. I think that is going to be the key factor which will decide whether Leeds will finish in top 10 and probably even push for a Europa League spot. Who knows? I think that in terms of ability, they have it all. But I think I'm going to be realistic and probably give them a top 8 finish this time, considering how I think Shine mentioned how Everton have strengthened and Wolves continuing the good run. I mean, Sheffield is also a good bet. I mean, I know even they have a manager who has a certain philosophy and the players play for him. So, considering all this, I think a top 8 would be a very, very good finish for Leeds in the on their return to Premier League.
Awesome. So some very interesting predictions throughout the podcast today. A top 8 finish is what we are predicting for Leeds. And with that, we've almost come to the end of today's podcast. We certainly hope you've enjoyed it. Next week, we're going to see a lot more action. Tottenham travel to the mighty Southampton. Chelsea host Liverpool. That's going to be an interesting match. Looking forward to that. Manchester United and Manchester City start their campaigns. United are at home to Palace, and City are away to Wolves, who won their first game. And Arsenal have a relatively easy game against West Ham. There's also some midweek Carabao Cup action to look forward to. And with that, the first podcast of the 6 Yards has come to an end. Thank you so much for joining in. See you all next week. Stay tuned for updates on our next podcast. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the 6 Yards Pod.